There's a lot of investors who are like, making 10% cash on cash, but you have a maintenance reserve.
When I would do Bigger Pockets webinars, I'd say things like, I always look for 10% cash on cash return. People are like, I get 22%. I'm like, no, you don't. And then I walk them through the math and I'm like, no, you're literally not charging for property management. Oh, I do that myself. Or repairs. Well, we don't have any repairs.
Yeah.
Or CapEx.
What happens when you have 70 properties?
Exactly. Yeah.
You're not going to manage 70.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm constantly arguing with people. You don't do your math right. I do my math right. This is the Better Life Podcast with Brandon Turner and my good friend,
Cathcart.
Cam Cathcart. I noticed you shaved a little bit, but it's coming back a little bit.
A little bit. I'll shave again tonight.
Are you going to keep the mullet going? The mullet's good, man.
So Lexi has requested, because we're going on a trip this summer to Rome, and it's like a romantic. It's our first trip without
You can't have
kids.
a mullet in Rome?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure all Romans
that's
have
what I
mullets.
told her. It's like, no, this is...
Haven't you seen like the ancient like sculptures?
Exactly.
Yeah, they'll have
so
mullets.
she's requested me to cut it.
Oh, I'm gonna talk to her.
Yeah.
I'll talk to her before you.
I don't think I'm going
Bro
to.
code. I'm gonna talk to her.
Yeah.
I'm a good wingman.
With short hair is like, it's too... Because I can't grow good facial hair. And
I think you can, but okay.
But I need something to like prove that I'm not like
A loser?
the 9 to 5
yeah.
accountant,
Okay.
like short hair. So I need something. So I always have to change my hair.
You're seeing people with short hair or 9 to 5 accountants?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Brandon, the accountant. Hey,
No, you got a beard though. You've got a beard. So you got something.
I
can't grow the beard.
Okay.
So I had to do something else.
All right. Well, hey, everybody. Today's show has nothing to do with what we're talking about now, but this show was awesome because Cam and I got to just drill a world-renowned expert at a topic we know nothing about that is super, super powerful for real estate investors, and that is sober living, as you probably saw in the title of this episode. So sober living, I mean, I know like 5% or 2% of what I know now. Like I knew yesterday 2% of what I know today, because we just drilled our guest today, Travis Gough, for an hour and a half on every single thing there is to know about sober living. It was awesome. It was phenomenal.
It was fascinating the way that you can build a business like that. The way that he goes from 0 to 70 houses in 5 years.
Yeah,
something like that.
And returns that are, I mean, like it's hard today to get any kind of cash flow. And Travis is getting like average 12, 13, 14% cash on cash return using this strategy that anybody watching this can use. So that's what you're going to learn today on the episode. All right, everybody, let's get to today's interview with Mr. Travis Gough.
Let's do it.
This episode is brought to you by our friends at TurboTenant and Ballpoint Marketing. These two companies are big supporters of the show, and they know how to work with real estate investors and help real estate investors grow their businesses. So be sure to stay tuned to hear how you can get, discounts and free stuff from them both. And as you probably know, all the profits from the show go to charities of the guest choosing. So when you listen to the sponsors on the show and you work with these hand-chosen by me sponsors, you're actually doing good for the world. Now let's get to the show. Travis Gough, welcome to the podcast, man.
Thank you. Stoked to be here.
Yeah, dude. So I've known you for a few years now. But I know you as a sober living expert, and you invest in sober living. You're the guy. I want to make sure we talk about that today. But you are the guy that I go to when I have questions about sober living. I know you as a former college athlete, which I did not know that before 5 minutes ago. I know you as a man of deep faith. I know you've got a strong faith, and we can definitely talk about that today. And I know you're a tech guy who got into real estate, now owns properties in 15 states. And so I think you got a fantastic story there. But take us back before all of that. Before real estate, who was Travis Gough?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in San Diego. My father was a general contractor. So grew up doing finish work, doing crown molding, baseboards, learning a lot of different types of, rehab, mostly around the neighborhood. But my dad, worked hard with his commercial general contracting company, but then he did a lot of side jobs. And so I helped him kind of through high school and all that, learning how to swing a hammer and do everything. And so real estate was always kind of on the back of my mind. But yeah, I was also an athlete. I played water polo. And
Can you?
Yeah.
For those who don't know, I mean,
Sure.
It's
a California sport.
What is water polo? Is that like horses in the water?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
I would say it's a mix of like football, soccer, and basketball in the water. So you've got 6 guys in the pool that are going offense and defense, plus a goalie on both sides. So it's kind of like a soccer goal. You can't touch the bottom. So you're treading water the whole time. You're fighting each other. So it's, very physical. and then you've got a ball that's close to the size of a basketball that you can grip, and then you're just basically trying to score. But it's similar to basketball in the sense that usually there's a larger person on offense who's kind of the center, and the offense revolves around that person. And then same thing on defense. There's somebody who guards that person, and then
I watched a YouTube video on water polo once, and it was like, do you guys remember the show Sports Science, where they did all the?
No.
So it was like that, and it was just talking about who is the most fit athletes that there is. And water polo won they had like a contest, and water polo won. And so they're the fittest athletes.
Is that because you're treading water, so you're moving all your muscles at one time?
You're fighting. You're throwing. It's insane,
dude. I was eating so much food in college. Like it was like I would sit in the cafeteria and just consume as much as I could, and I couldn't add weight like at all. Like it was just, we were in the pool, 6 hours a day plus weight room and all that. It was nuts. So
this might be a dumb question, but go back to horses. Is water polo and polo similar? Or are they completely different things? Like horse polo, like is that what they call it? Horse polo?
I don't know what horse polo
Yeah.
is. Is that for you?
Yeah, that's like polo. Like that's like a thing, right? Am I saying the word wrong? I think that's like a famous sport.
It's very
horses.
Very different.
Okay.
Not that I actually know
now I gotta look up
the sport of horse polo.
Well, what is it called? Horse polo? What
I
do
think
you
it
call
is where you have like the little
polo
hammer and you swing and hit the ball and you're trying to get into net.
I actually went to one of those ones.
Did you?
Can't say I really paid attention.
Yeah,
to the
polo
sport.
is a ball game that is played on horseback, a traditional field sport, and one of the world's oldest known team sports. Yeah, my one of my team members at Open Door Capital is a huge polo player. Sydney, shout out to Sydney. What's up, Sydney? So yeah, anyway, not the same thing probably.
Not at all.
Okay, because no horses. I don't think you fight people in polo, horse polo.
But you are still trying to get a ball through net or
just like basketball and football and
yeah.
hockey.
Yeah, the golf.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so not that it has anything to do with real estate or business or whatever, but I know
it was
more than I did before.
It was good. It's teaches you, team sports, hard work. It was a lot of work, especially through college and stuff. But I played on the junior national team, so I traveled abroad and I went to Serbia and got to see some rough parts of the world, kind of through that, which was cool. Fortunately, was able to get a scholarship going to Pepperdine, and so played at Pepperdine, and that was a ton of fun. And that kind of
isn't Pepperdine one of the better schools in the nation for water polo?
Yeah. They've changed divisions now, so it's a little bit different. But back then, our biggest competitors were like USC, UCLA, Stanford. One year we got second overall. We lost to USC, but most years we were top 5.
It's amazing.
How would you know that, Cam, that Pepperdine is a good school for water polo? Like,
I like to stay.
Yeah, what a random stat you just know. I don't even know what Pepperdine is. I've heard the name, but you obviously know
beautiful campus.
Yeah, what else do they rank for? What else are they good sport wise?
Tell us more. Didn't their basketball team maybe made the NCAA tournament this year? Their
volleyball team is really good.
Volleyball team.
Yeah.
I don't actually care. I just wanted to know.
I don't know much about Pepperdine.
Yeah.
I know that I've been there, and their pool is beautiful. It overlooks the Pacific
It's in
Ocean.
Malibu.
Okay.
Yeah, it's awesome.
All right. So how do you go from that to tech founder? Where is that? How's that journey go?
So
or tech guy?
I kind of just hustled through college playing water polo pretty much full time. I double majored, and then I was also working as a valet in Malibu, driving ridiculous sports cars and all that. And so then got out, went into sales, which was cool. I was able to make good money first couple of years out of college. But I was, always the company I was working for was making a lot more than me. And so I got into startups and I worked for a couple, learned a few different things of what to do and what not to do. And then through the second one, I met my co-founder and then we started our company, started out kind of in the hardware business and then grew into a tech company.
But how's that work? You start in hardware and you go into...
Yeah, we basically built a kiosk that did digital currency transactions.
Okay.
And so we started out with the hardware and then we built all of the software around it. And so we did some facial recognition stuff, some identity verification, and then a whole bunch of financial transaction software, which just kind of stumbled into. Which is cool. It was exciting as we were kind of growing and all that. But at the peak, it was close to 100 employees, ton of payroll, a lot of overhead. it was all like grow, grow, grow.
You raising money, like VC money and all that?
Not VC money. We probably should have gone that route. I mean, we definitely took the path of, hey, like, let's just reinvest our profits and let's raise a little bit of money. And we fortunately were able to take some chips off the table. And so that kind of helped. But we were trying to retain more equity and have a bigger exit. And so we definitely got greedy on that side of things. But it was a grind. I mean, I was there for 7 years, and it was, I mean, with that many employees, it got, sort of political and stuff. It's like, all right, we got the engineering department that is really good, but can't get along with the marketing team. And, so we had meetings to have meetings, and it was getting yeah. So
did you sell, or how'd you get out of that? I know. And how did that transition happen?
So we had a term sheet to sell.
What does that mean? Like somebody offered like a LOI kind of?
A big private equity company came in. They owned one of their other portfolio companies. They wanted to merge us with that company. And so it was a commercial agreement where we would do this big kind of integration with them, and then they would acquire us. So it was, they kind of didn't work well together, but it kind of forced us to spend a lot of money going in that direction. And through that term sheet, they had an option to buy us. So it wasn't binding, but there was a no shop. So we basically couldn't take that, go out and raise outside money. And that was about a 9-month period. And then through COVID, the market kind of hit a big turn, and then they pulled the plug on both the commercial contract and the acquisition at the same time. And by that time, we used up $1.5 million, investing in the commercial agreement. So the company still exists. My partner's still trying to get it back on its feet, but it took a big hit, and I was so far out the door by the time that happened. So it was unfortunate that the big exit didn't happen, but it was also a blessing because I got my time back. I got to focus on real estate, which is what I am passionate for. And fortunately, I already had real estate to fall back on. So when I left, it's like, all right, I've got my other business right here.
Yeah.
And it was super easy for me to transition into that. And so it went pretty smooth.
Well, let's talk about your entrance into real estate investing then. Where did that come from? Because it was during that time then, I'm assuming. So where'd you get the idea? What was your first deal?
Yeah. I mean, my first deal was in 2016. Bought a short sale. My wife and I bought a condo with an ocean view in North County, San Diego. We still have that today. But yeah, short sale. We took a little bit of time to close, kind of working through the ins and outs of that. And it was perfect. It had great ocean views, but it was bright blue carpets and like very dated and everything. But when we saw it, we were both like, this is the one. And so we jumped on that. We did full rehab ourselves. We gutted the entire thing. And so a lot of sweat equity there, which was cool. And we still have that today. And fortunately, we were able to do a cash out refi. We basically bird that property. Yeah. I've taken out more money than I've put into it at this point. And cash flow is about $400 a month.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And it's doubled in value because it's an ocean view in San Diego.
Yeah.
So that was a good deal. Then moved to Washington a couple of years later and bought our house. We did sort of a burr with that as well while we're living in it. And I was still working with my company, but I was able to take some money off the table from that company and wanted to start deploying it into real estate. But in 2018, I thought the market was kind of high, but I wanted to start getting reps in. So I started asking around, finding out, who's investing in this space, going to some meetups and just wanted to start seeing deals. And that's where I met my partner, Jared Galdi. And he basically brought me a deal that was a sober living house. And he had never heard anything about it. He just stumbled upon it that day. And he's like, hey, I heard about this. I don't have the money to take this down, but I'm going to go check it out. Do you want to go with me? And so I was like, yeah, let's go. And so this was in Marysville, Washington. The house was $580,000. And they had a company, Oxford House, who wanted to lease it for 5 years at $5,800 a month. And I'm like, well, I'll do the math, but I'm pretty sure that pencils. And so we did some quick due diligence. And so I ended up buying that in July of 2019 and closed on it it worked out great. Did some rehab on it ourselves. And my mind was like, all right, this is awesome. How do we scale it? And through that process, we got to meet some of the people that moved into the house. It was actually the 300th house that they lease in Washington State. So it was, I mean, it's 580,000 is an expensive sober living house, but it was like a beacon house for them to have meetings at. They brought in the state, like the people who do grant money and stuff for the state of Washington came, and we got to meet them all. These women that moved into it, like they were just so happy. They came and like gave us big hugs and they were crying. And it was like, we've never had a house like this before.
Really?
And so that was like, oh my gosh, like I got into it because I was like, this is awesome cash flow, right? But then we saw the impact of it and we got to meet some of these people and hear their stories and see how much this house means to them. And that was like, we need to figure out how to do this over and over again. And so that was July of 18 that we closed. By September, we closed on 6 more.
Wow, dude, that's amazing. That's what's fun about real estate is you find like your you find your thing. This is what I'm always preaching about, the crystal clear criteria, which is like your location, your strategy, your condition, your price range, just like getting your buy box narrowed. And then once you have it and it's like, oh, this is profitable and they exist, you can just scale.
Yeah.
I love it. Can you go back though and explain, like, dumb it down? What is sober living? I mean, like what kind of house is this? Is this like, what does this look like? Why do people need them? How they operate?
Yeah. So that's sort of a loaded question because sober living is a wide kind of spectrum.
Okay.
And you can take it in a lot of different directions. Obviously, people think of like treatment centers, and that's more of like a medical facility.
Yeah.
And there's inpatient, outpatient. Obviously, that the difference is people stay there overnight versus outpatient for a treatment center. And then there's different levels of like single family housing for sober living housing. So sober living is basically everything outside of treatment. And the different levels have to do with the amount of care that they're getting. So ours are basically level 1 housing. So the houses are self-run. They're democratically like voted into the house or out of the house. And they're self-managed, but they're overseen by a national nonprofit who they call them outreach workers, but they're basically social workers that live in that market and they oversee each of the houses. But there's not a nurse or somebody that's at the house actually giving treatment. That would be like a level 3 or level 4 house where there's a live-in manager who's providing treatment and doing things like that. There's also like the outpatient treatment centers. They might have a house that is really close to the treatment center. And so they get all the treatment at the center, but then the people, while they're there for 30, 60 days, they're living at the house. They're not working. They're not doing anything. They're focused on their sobriety, and they're basically just shuttling them to the treatment center twice a day. And so we've done a few of those as well.
Dang. Okay. So let's just talk about this $580,000 one.
Yep.
How many bedrooms are in this? And is it a normal house, or is this more like a facility feel?
No. So this one is larger. We had, in order to make the numbers work at that price point for them, we had to add more beds. So this house was, it was a 7-bedroom house already, including there was a formal dining room. So we basically closed that in and we made it a proper bedroom. So that was 7 rooms, and then it had a 5-car garage. And so we permitted and we built out 3 of those garage bays into 3 more bedrooms. And so it became basically a 10-bedroom house. Yeah.
And then Oxford House is the one that you worked with on that, right?
Yep.
Where do they get their money from? Is this government? Is this, you said nonprofit. So how does that operate?
So they've been around for 47 years now. And obviously they have a large presence in Washington State. It's one of the largest ones.
Okay.
And basically they get state contracts. And fortunately, there's more contracts coming in more states. They're in every state, but there's a few states where they only have like 1 or 2 houses. Yeah. And then there's others where they have hundreds. And it all comes down to the state contract. And fortunately now some of the kind of opioid settlement money that's kind of coming through the system is providing more state contracts. But what that basically provides them is a startup loan. So they're not just getting grant money to fund the houses. They get a loan to open the houses because they have to furnish them and they have to get them stabilized so they can start paying the rent. But then they also need to pay for those outreach workers who live close by, or they live in one of the houses, and then they get a salary. It's not a huge salary. They're a social worker. But they are the ones that are helping open houses, place people in the houses, and then they kind of oversee them as they have them stabilized.
Does every house have a social worker assigned to it?
So there's almost every area. There's a couple cities around the country that have just followed their model and opened their own houses. So Kansas City is like an anomaly. They've done remarkably well. And they basically it's been like kind of a grassroots development where like they started with one house and they were like, hey, like let's open this house and let's, these 8 guys are going to move in together and follow the Oxford model. It's still considered an Oxford house. And then those 8 guys are like, hey, like let's go open another house. And so they've just done it themselves. And I don't know how many they have in Kansas City now, but they've done really well doing that. But it took kind of ownership on whoever started doing that in the area.
Yeah. And when is Oxford, it's a master lease, correct? With you?
Yeah. So for just as a real estate investor, the huge benefits for us is, one, we pre-negotiate the lease before we even buy the property. So we work with them to identify properties, and then we negotiate it before we even make an offer on the property. Because I might make an offer and we agree to, $3,000 a month, but then we can't get the numbers to work with the sellers because we're like, hey, we can buy this for X. And then we'll go back and renegotiate and be like, hey, like we can get this house. The sellers are on board, but we need it to be $3,100 a month. And it'll either work or it won't. And so that's one of the huge benefits, but also the lease is with the nonprofit. So there's Oxford House Incorporated, which is like the large nonprofit. And then each individual house is a subsidiary of that nonprofit. So they have their own bank account, and they're basically their own nonprofit. So the lease is with them, but the people who are living in the house are not considered tenants. So they do not follow tenant landlord eviction laws or anything like that. They're considered members in a nonprofit organization.
Oh, interesting.
And what that means is if they relapse or they don't follow the house rules or they just don't get along with the rest of the members in the house, they can get voted out and they can actually be removed from the house for trespassing. So we have no issues with evictions.
That's an incredible. How does that though play into like, the squat? Like, I mean, you can be a homeless person, go squat in a house and take 6 months to get them out nowadays in a lot of states. Like, because police just don't want to get involved. There's like, we're not touching this. So is that a possibility? Is that a risk here? Is that a possibility? Or just drag them out?
We haven't had any issues in the last 5 years of doing this. So Oxford House is a strong legal team and they always side on the side of the landlord.
Yeah.
So that's been super helpful. I don't see that being a problem. That hasn't been a problem in any scenario. And there's other people living there. So I don't think that, if there's other people living there, it's like, hey, this person just came into our house.
Yeah.
And if somebody relapses and destroys the house or something like that, is that on you guys or is that on Oxford House? Who?
So we've had some wild stories over the years across a lot of different houses. We had one that got heavily vandalized. One individual got real aggressive and like basically kind of kicked the other people out of the house. And Oxford went through the eviction like to remove him. So I guess he was sort of squatting on the house and we didn't even know about it for a while, but they kept paying rent and they basically removed him from the house. And once they did, they were like, hey, there's holes in like every wall. That he broke windows. He did a whole bunch of this stuff. And at first they were like, we want to be transparent with you. We want to let you know, like we're taking donations and we've got a guy who can do drywall and like all this. And we're like, well, send us pictures. Like we got a whole bunch of pictures. I'm like, no, like this is not a quick donation thing. This is not like finding a guy who knows a little bit about drywall and stuff. Yeah. So we filed an insurance claim on that for vandalism and we were able to get that paid for.
Oh, that's cool.
And
because the guy was a squatter, essentially. He wasn't a tenant, which I don't know if insurance would pay for a tenant damage. I don't think they would. But for a squatter, effectively they would.
Yeah. So that worked out. And then the tenants continued to pay. We worked with them on a payment plan, but they continued to pay rent and got caught up on the house. So So from our standpoint, yeah, it was unfortunate. We had to, work through all that. We had to pay the insurance deductible. But overall, that's the worst scenario we've had.
It's not a bad worst.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, everybody was like, we were sitting around a table. Were you there the other day? Yeah, we were in Coeur d'Alene. I don't know if you were still there. And we were sitting around the dinner table. We had 15 friends of ours all hanging out in Coeur d'Alene for a fitness challenge we did. Everyone's a real estate investor. And so we're sitting there and somebody, my like house assistant nanny, Brielle, was there. And she said something about a fire. And I was like, oh yeah, we had a fire. And somebody across the table goes, oh yeah, I had a fire once. And then Brielle goes, have you guys all had fires?
We've had a fire once.
Every single person at the table, everyone raised their hand. And so like at the end of the, and that was it was such a funny conversation because she was so shocked. And every single person to a T said, yeah, we came out ahead. Like it was a net benefit for us. I mean, obviously if somebody dies, which none of us had anybody die, but insurance wise. So the reason I bring that up is because things like that, like scare people away. Like, oh, but what if the tenant does this on one of your many properties? Something goes bad. It does. That happens. And almost every time it's fine. I've never had, I mean, it's never not been fine. I've never once been like, well, that was I should never bought that deal because of that tenant.
Yeah.
Never.
Yeah. Hopefully it's, your first deal insurance claim isn't that big.
Yeah.
Because it's definitely a process fighting with insurance adjusters and working out all the, to make sure you can get the house at least back to where it was. But
I have like 5,000 questions. This is going to be a fun,
just
fire you questions. All right. How many do you have total now, by the way?
Closing in on 70.
70, dude.
Yeah. So how many doors is that in those?
Well, they're all single family.
Or I guess how many
bedrooms per home
members do you have?
So their average is about 8 to 10 people per house. There's some that are a little bit larger, like that one that the first house that we call the 300 house. It's got 12 in it. So that's basically as large as it can get. Our smallest is probably 7.
Yeah.
So
you might have 600
doors or
members.
Yeah.
Wild. Okay.
Yep.
I got so many questions, man. All right. So first of all, repairs, CapEx, things like that. Is there a certain number, like when the toilet breaks, do they fix their own toilet? Are you going in there on a $12 toilet, flapper, or like, how does that work?
Yeah. So, I mean, we've worked with our lease over a period of time, where, they'll pay the first $300 now.
Yeah. I love
and
that.
so that kind of helps us on a lot of things.
Do you do that with any of your rentals, Cam?
We don't. No.
We don't either, but I don't know why I don't. Other than that, maybe somebody, if like a water leak, they'd be like, well, I'm not going to fix that because I don't have the $50 to fix it. So then you have a $50,000 problem. Maybe,
that's exactly why we don't, is because we want them to tell us anytime that there's something wrong with the house.
Yeah.
And so instead of being worried that, hey, I've got to pay $300. And we do have in the lease that if it's like from them, like we pulled out so many toys from toilets and it's like, oh, we got to charge you for this now.
Yeah.
But
but I like the model a lot, especially with, this is obviously a different scenario. Oxford House is responsible enough that they can pay that and they're not going to let the house go to.
Yeah. So what we did, we have a property management company now. So we started that in 2020 as we started scaling this, just pretty much for our own properties, because it's different. Like we're in multiple states. We have to learn how to do this remotely. We don't have to deal with marketing or anything. It's not like a normal rental. We have these leases in place and we'll negotiate, at the renewal. But there's other challenges that we have to deal with. Sometimes we have to deal with municipalities and, other stuff. We do heavy inspections. But we also have access to the houses whenever we want. So not like a regular tenant, like you have to give them a certain notice and all that. Like we can tell them, hey, like we're going to send somebody there tomorrow and they're going to be taking 100 pictures of the house. And we're just, doing our due diligence to make sure the house is still in good shape. So
what if so tenants aren't paying their own, I mean, are they paying Oxford or who's paying?
So yeah, great question. So they get the startup loan to basically get the house off the ground.
Okay.
But then the people who are living in the house, they're paying their own way.
Okay.
So with Oxford House in particular, there's no duration. So they could live there for a week. They could live there for 15 years. And there are houses that have been around for over a decade where it's the same 8 guys that have lived there. And it's just an affordable way for them to live. They're, sober together and they're their family. So with that, they're paying their own share of the house. And so it's more cash flow for us as investors, but it's also affordable housing for them because they get to share in the costs of that house.
when they're paying, are they paying Oxford House, then Oxford House is paying you, or
So
are you dealing with them directly?
Yeah, great question. So they're paying into the nonprofit bank account for the house. So the house has its own checking account, and they have to pay into like chapter dues. They have to pay, all the utilities. Sometimes, if they have a surplus, they'll throw a pizza party or whatever. But they also have to maintain reserves in case there's vacancies, because they got to pay our rent every month, whether there's 2 people in the house or 8 people.
Yeah, that was my next question is what happens if there's 2 people in the house because it's empty?
Yeah. So they have to build their own reserves.
Okay.
Sometimes, I mean, with us being in enough markets, it comes down to kind of the management of the houses and making sure that they're being fiscally responsible and keeping those reserves. Because if they don't, we've had a few scenarios where they've gotten behind on rent because they had a whole house turnover or, had certain situations. And this is where, we just have come in and try to be a good partner with them and understand the situation. And then we'll work on a payment plan to help them pay that back balance. And, they've been extremely grateful. And I think that's put us in a good spot to allow us to actually buy as many houses that we have now, because they typically shy away from, quote, investors. They like landlords. They want, the couple that has a second house and is willing to rent that house for a little bit over market because they want to have impact or they have, some tie to sober living. So.
And when people do move out, how do they find new people? Is Oxford House going and marketing for that? Is that specific house, like the subsidiary, finding that? Or are you helping them find somebody? Or how does that work? How do they find new tenants when people move out?
So what's great about our model is we're the investors, right? Like I'm not doing any of the operations in the business. So Oxford House is doing all of the placement of the people. I don't hear about it unless we're talking to them or we're asking. I don't know how many people are living there currently. Yeah. I know how many they can have there, but I don't know if it's 5, 6, 8. And I mean, if the house is well established and they decide, hey, we want a couple rooms to be single rooms, so this house can hold 8, but maybe we all pay a little bit more and we keep it at 6. They can do that.
Okay.
But it's usually the outreach worker who helps build the house up in the beginning and fill it. And they're mostly going out and they're going to like AA meetings, or they're going to treatment centers for basically people who are getting out of treatment and they need some place to go. Because when you come out of treatment, depending on your financial situation, a lot of people have, kind of hit rock bottom. They've destroyed their credit. They've, sometimes been incarcerated. It's really hard for them to, one, be able to rent a place if they can. So they're either going to go stay with a family member or they're going to go back on the streets if they don't have some sort of, outlet to reach out to. And so Oxford House kind of fills that gap. And so it helps people who couldn't either pay for it or qualify to get a normal rental.
It's amazing.
What's the demand like for sober living? And what I mean by that is like supply and demand in terms of like, is there a tremendous demand for sober living housing? And so there's never a problem filling these things up because there's so many people desperate for it? Or is it the opposite, or is it somewhere balanced?
Well, let's put it this way. So opioid deaths in 2019, I believe it was around 25,000. It has 5x'd since then.
Wow.
The problem is getting worse, not better. There needs to be a lot more houses. And part of it is education. So certain markets where it's already established, they need more houses. So Illinois is one of our biggest markets right now. We bought the first 2 houses for them in Illinois. I'm closing this week on the 100th house in Illinois in the last 3 years. And we've bought in a whole bunch in the middle. But they've opened 100 houses in 3 years in the state of Illinois, all over the place.
And so is the only really limitation there just the government willing to play ball? Like, is it just trying to get the government to play ball with Oxford?
So it's the state contract, and sometimes it's a private contract. There's been some individuals who need write-offs, who can, basically put up, it doesn't cost a whole lot. Like to pay for an outreach worker to go into a specific market, they need $50,000 to basically open that market. And now they can start opening houses, but then they need to maintain it. And so it's better if they can get a state contract, and they pretty much always renew those state contracts. And so,
yeah. What is the risk if something comes out where Oxford House is doing something shady or something like that, and it shuts down tomorrow? Now you have 70 houses that are built out for sober living, where you've converted dining rooms into bedrooms and garages into bedrooms, and not really for the traditional family. Like, does that scare you at all? Where it's like, hey, we could have 70 houses that need tons of rehab and not getting any money. Is there a fear of that, or
Not really.
not really?
Oxford House is well run,
Mhm.
and I mean, I can't think of a scenario like they're a nonprofit.
Yeah.
Like they have different kind of governing bodies in different regions, and I mean so the benefit to them is they're the only federally recognized evidence-based recovery homes in the country,
Mhm.
and the benefit to working with them is they actually have a Supreme Court case in Washington State. They basically sued a city who said, you can't have this house here. This is more than the number of unrelated individuals living in a house for this area. And they basically fought back. It went all the way to the Supreme Court, and they said because of their addiction, they have a disability and they have to receive a reasonable accommodation. And so they've used that
Wow.
over and over again. And that has their legal team has fought every municipality who has pushed back. And so they've been able to kind of follow that process. In terms of like, if they went away, which
Mhm.
I don't,
Yeah.
there's very low possibility that could actually happen. It is possible. It would take some time, but it is possible to basically set up our own sober living homes.
Mhm.
Yep.
And in a lot of areas, it's like you can open the house and then you can apply for like, depending on if you need licensing for the area or a reasonable accommodation, you can do that. And in some areas, you don't need anything.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of houses where like they would just keep running as they are. They just wouldn't
Yeah.
be considered sober living houses.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then, we would have a master lease with a entity,
Mhm.
or we would be the, operator.
Yeah.
I feel
which
like in
is
some
something-
markets you just rent by the room too. Like even if you had to, like,
Oh, yeah.
okay, we want to do sober living. Now it's just
Yeah.
rent by the room, $500 a room, and
Totally.
you fill up the house that way too. That's a
Because
great
with rent
strategy,
by
too.
the room, they do the same thing where it's like a fraternity that owns the house, and then
There's a lot
everybody
of ways
that
to do
lives
that,
there
for
is a
sure.
member.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways. I know that's what
Mhm.
Sam does. He does
Yeah.
the membership kind of thing, which, yeah, could work. What about, okay, let's use like Chicago as an example. There are areas of Chicago where you can buy a house for $100,000 still.
Mhm.
There are areas of Chicago that you buy the same house for $1 million. And it's just
Yeah.
neighborhood. Does Oxford pay significantly more for the $1 million neighborhood as the 100,000, or is it the same because it's Chicago or it's Illinois in general? So of course you're going to go with the $100,000 property.
Yeah. So they're going to pay more based on the zip code, the neighborhood that it's in, for sure.
Mhm.
I mean, there's more jobs. There's,
Yeah.
cost of living is just
Mhm.
higher. Like I have a house in Northern California, and it's significantly more there than it is anywhere in Illinois.
Okay, yeah.
But we're not playing in the $100,000 range. We're not playing in the, I would say, 700 plus.
Mhm.
Like there's certain area. I mean, in Illinois, we really don't go over like 400.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then for capital, so one of the things that we've gotten to chat before about this is that you are able to find a lot of your deals because of the cash flow just off of the MLS, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Almost all of our deals are turnkey or close to turnkey on the market homes.
And so then are you burring those? Or are you putting 20% down on them? What does financing look
Yeah.
like?
So this has been a process over the last
Uh-huh.
5 years. So the first one I bought, and then we ended up closing on 10 houses, including that first one in the first 6 months
Mhm.
before COVID hit. And it was like, all right, let's just go. And so I threw a lot of my capital at it that I had at the
And
time.
we're just doing 20% down, 20% down.
Yeah.
20, okay.
Yeah. And like that first house, we actually, we got not close to a burr, but we got like half of our money back because after we added those bedrooms, we appraised at 710. And I think now we have a $710,000 house. Now it's over $1 million.
Yeah.
But back in 2019, we did that. We've got like 48 grand in the deal.
Wow.
So yeah. So that one turned out really well. But for those first 10, basically a lot of my own money, and then friends and family we just did debt.
Mhm.
So some friends and family were like, all right, hey, we can pay 8% on this. And then we were learning a lot, like how to buy a house in an entity, seasoning, all this different lending stuff. And so for those 6 that we closed in September, we actually had a lender pull the plug on us a week before closing. And so we had to close all 6, 35% down, hard money. And so that was a big kind of test. So we ended up getting one lender who gave us a short-term note at 24%. Just
So
like,
telling you,
let's just get it done. Yeah. And so we did. And it took us like 4 or 5 months to pay that back. But we still have those houses, and like it worked out great. We were able to refinance them back then. Before COVID, we were able to do cash outs at 80. And for some of them we did some rehab. And so we pulled out, more than 20%.
Yeah.
So,
and, when you go to refinance, like now, like let's say because of the cash flow, will a bank appraise it as a single family house, or will they appraise it based upon the cash flow? Because I've heard of some products out there that'll look like an Airbnb that's making, $100,000 a month in income, and they'll appraise it more as like a business versus a single family rental.
Yeah. So for these, they're not going to appraise it as a business. You might be able to find like a community bank or somebody that can get creative, but like for us, we're doing volume in a lot of different markets. So like it's a single family home, and actually a lot of lenders, it was easier before. After COVID and things kind of tightened up, a lot of them don't like sober living houses. So we're buying vacant houses, and we can get DSCR loans, asset-based loans. Now we're doing bank statement loans, which is great. I didn't realize that you could use a property management business for that. And they actually really like property management businesses for bank statements. So
can you explain bank statement loan?
Yeah. So
how's that work?
They basically, debt service coverage ratio loan is probably the most well-known asset-based loan. And what that means is they're going to get an appraisal on the house, and then they're also going to look at the market rent. They won't look at our rent. They'll see whatever the market is calling for. And it's really hard to kind of figure out what rent is because it's not on the MLS. No one says what they rented it for. You just look for what people are posting it as. Yeah. And so it's hit or miss whether that works well or not. And so we've had to, especially with higher interest rates, we've had to bring more cash to the table sometimes. So 25, 30% sometimes to close on houses if the market rent is too low. But a bank statement loan, they don't care about the market rent. The house still has to appraise, but they're underwriting you based on your deposits. And so they'll give you a certain percentage of the deposits that are coming through your bank account on a monthly basis and determining that you're credit worthy to be able to pay that note.
One of the things that I've heard with a bank statement loan, they're not looking at your P&L or anything. So you could be making, $10 million a year, but spending $11 million, and they don't really care when it's a bank statement loan.
Yeah. I mean, with a property management business, like these are all rents. Like they're taking our deposits in rents, and we're paying a lot of mortgages.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
so you're making, with 70 properties at $5,000 a month, you're making $350,000 in income a month, and they're not looking at that's.
I mean, I'm depositing $72 million a year into my property management company.
Yeah.
So you could go
get a bank statement loan.
Go buy yourself a $300 million house.
If you want to start
exactly.
Yeah. So Travis, how do I use the fact that I've got $70 million a year going into my checking account?
Well, if you want to start buying single family homes, then
you know who to call.
I don't think it'll be that difficult for you to do.
But actually,
this is fascinating.
So, and you guys, did you and Jared started a fund, correct, to help buy? So I want to hear about that.
Yeah. So the first step was kind of the first 10. That was our own money and friends and family. And that was just debt. So owned all those houses 100%. Then COVID hit. We took a bit of a break, and we started buying again at the end of 2020. And we started raising a fund. So this is our first real estate fund. And so kind of went through the process and then bought a few houses at the end of 2020 with our own money, but then ended up buying those into the fund, which officially launched in 2021. And so we raised a couple $1,000,000. We went out and we bought 26 houses through that vehicle. And so that worked out really well when property values were, where they were, even as they were kind of growing. And interest rates were in the mid 4s.
Yeah.
And so we set the terms on that. It worked great. Investors were happy. We still pay them great cash flow. But once home prices continue to grow and interest rates it just didn't make sense with the terms that we had set because I mean, we were getting 17, 18% cash on cash on average back then with 4.5% rates. And, now at 7.5%, it's like, we're looking at anything that's 10% and above, but, we're averaging, 12, 13%. But that's, after property management, that's after all of our other, there's a lot of investors who are like, I'm making, 10% cash on cash, but do you have a maintenance reserve? Are you factoring in property management, or are you doing all this work yourself?
I constantly fight investors on this. Like, especially over the last, when I would do Bigger Pockets webinars, I'd say things like, I always look for 10% cash on cash return. And people are like, I get a 22%. I'm like, no, you don't. And they're like, yeah, I do. And then I walk them through the math and I'm like, no, you're literally not charging for property management. Oh, I do that myself, or repairs. Well, we don't have any repairs or CapEx. We don't need to fix anything.
70 properties?
Exactly. Yeah.
You're not going to manage 70.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's like apples to apples. I'm constantly arguing with people, but I'm like, no, you're comparing apples to oranges here. Like, you don't do your math right. I do my math right. Like,
that's why you can never believe anything on social media.
That's why you can't believe anything. That's an argument I make for like, to try to raise money. You got a fund, I've got a fund, you raise private money. So it's like when I'm talking to an investor and they're like, well, I get 15% on my own. So why would I take 10% or whatever from Open Door Capital, or now like probably more like 5 or 6? And it's like, well, because you're not getting 50, like you're not. So I have to like talk investors, be like, no, what you're getting is not actually what you think you're getting. That's why the whole idea of like pure cash flow, I call it. Like pure cash flow is like gone through the fire of CapEx, repairs, vacancy, all that. And what you're left with is a much smaller number.
Yeah. So you're getting 12% pure cash flow, essentially.
Yeah.
Right now. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what we've been getting on average.
That's amazing.
And with your fund, is that, what are you offering your investors?
So the terms of that deal, it was an 8% pref, preferred return. And then it was a 60-40 split where the investors would get a 60% waterfall after the 8% is paid. But the benefit there is we did a 50-50 equity. So, on my end, I was like, the cash flow is great. We'll get the 40% on the waterfall, but I also get 50% of the equity on the growth. And I mean, we bought all those houses in 2020 and 2021. So I just looked at the portfolio. I mean, we've made a couple $1 million in equity since then.
And is that the fund that you still have going on right now, or?
No, so we closed that down once interest rates started going up, and it just didn't make it as much sense because, I mean, the way that we pitched that deal was we were targeting 17% back then. And then the investors kind of got used to that. And then we kind of talked to them, we're like, hey, like we can buy more, but this is going to be like, 12. And they're like, well, let's wait and let's see if we can do more. And so as soon as they paused, we're like, all right, well, we're going to keep buying. So I refinanced kind of the first 10, not all of them, but some of them, and then went out and bought a few more. And then now we just have a capital partner. So just a high net worth individual who is our third partner. So Jared, myself, we do all the work. And then our third partner brings the down payment to all the deals. And then we just have a simple structure there through this partnership. And I have one investor that I have to deal with now.
Love that.
And
I love that.
Can you explain? Because I've been able to hang out with you and Jared before, and you guys get along great and seem that you guys are both incredible people. Like, what are your guys' roles in the business? How do you guys interact with each other, and who, like, I think that's always just tough. Partnerships are hard. And so I'm interested in like how you and Jared are able to do that and now own 70 houses together.
Yeah. That's a great question. I mean, it's definitely not easy to have partnerships, whether it's real estate or other businesses. Like it's like a marriage, right? Like you got to find out where your strengths and weaknesses and be able to call each other out when, there are challenges. But for us, like we have our lanes and we work really well together. So I'm more of the numbers guy. So I focus on acquisitions and the financials and kind of all of that side of it. Jared has done probably 600 plus transactions at this point. So before we started working together, he was a broker and he did flips and he's done, development and various different things. And so he's got experience doing a lot of the like inspection stuff. And so I get the property under contract. I work with the lenders and basically put in all the financing. He handles all the inspection side of that. And if there's any rehab, he helps oversee a lot of that side of it. And then we also have a property management company together. And so him and his wife are heavily involved with the property management company. And we have a couple employees in there as well. One of which that we actually hired from Oxford House.
That's awesome.
He was a general contractor before. And so he's got a construction background. He knows how to, diagnose issues with houses and all that. And so he's the one who answers the phone, and we don't have to do any of that. But yeah, so Jared kind of helps with all of the construction, rehab, maintenance side of things. I'm more of the financial side of it, and the numbers, the acquisition. And then Jared's also just an amazing like people person, because I would say at least 50% of success in sober living is relationships.
Yeah.
Because like I said, they don't like working with investors, and we actually got blackballed for a while. Like we flew out to DC to like their national conference 3 years ago, and we got to meet all the people that worked in all these different areas, and like we were getting along and going out to dinner with them, and like we had a great time, and we felt amazing after that. We're like, this is awesome. Like we just made so many like awesome new friends, and like we're gonna work in all these new markets. Little did we know the like upper management saw us getting really friendly with all these people, and they're like, these investors are coming in, and they're this is not good. And what we found is that other investors have gotten into the space, and they basically became slumlords. So they're not going to fix problems. They're, and it might be that they're not trying to, they just don't factor in the CapEx and some of those things, and they can't afford to, replace a roof or HVAC, because those things are going to happen.
Yeah. So you think they'd want to find the good landlord, the good investors, and then just double down and work with them a ton.
Yeah.
But
so
that's
that
logic.
Now we've kind of come full circle.
Yeah.
And so now we've been put through the test, and we've partnered with them. We've worked through some challenging times. And so now I feel like they trust us more. And we've kind of found certain regions that work really well, one for our numbers, but also where we just have really strong relationships, and they see that we have good intentions, that we want to be long-term partners, and that we're not going to go in and say, hey, we've got half your houses in this market and they're all coming up for renewal, and we're going to jack the rents up 30%.
Yeah.
So that's what's allowed us to kind of stand the test of time. And now they're sending a lot of deals our way.
So are they even finding houses sometimes?
Oh, yeah.
So they'll find the house and just, wow. So you don't even have to find the house in some.
Not in I mean, we have agents in a lot of different areas, but yeah, they'll send us deals. I mean, in Illinois, like we are really close with the team out there, and they'll send me deals all the time, every week. It's like, hey, here's a house. This is what we're thinking on rent. They already know what our numbers are like. And so they when they look at a house, they see the price and they know about what we're going to need. And so they won't even send it to us if they think like it's not going to work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got a few more questions on the, like, just kind of rapid fire at you on sober living. And then I'd love to move on to some more like your personal life and family and all that. But tax benefits, are they the same as normal real estate, I'm assuming? Like you still get depreciation and all that?
Yeah. Same as normal single family real estate.
Okay. Are they men and women's houses separated, or are they they're never together?
Never co-ed. In some scenarios, they have like a women's and children's house. So like it'll be a, 10 woman house with up to 3 kids.
How are, not to get in tangent real hard here, but especially Washington State being a much more liberal state, California as well. How are you dealing with, like, have you had to deal with the trans sort of situation? Like when, like you wouldn't deal with it anyway, but how do they deal with it? Like when you have guys that say they're girls or girls that want to be guys, where do you put them in a house? Is that causing problems?
That's a great question. And that's not really on my side
it would
of things.
Be on them. I'd be super curious of where that ends up.
Yeah.
Because that's a tough one.
Yeah, that is.
It's like prison, I guess. The same thing with prisons are dealing with that. They're like, well, where do we put people?
Yeah.
Is it biological or is it identity based? And that's a tough one.
Yeah.
But you haven't had to deal with it because you're an investor,
I'm
not an
sure
operator.
there's a house that has had to deal with it. There's probably quite a few, and we just don't hear about those things.
Yeah. Wild.
This has been such a, like,
I know, learning
I'm
a
just
ton of
learning
stuff.
so much.
So I love this question. I don't ask it very often. But I really like this question. In terms of scaling a company, there's really only, like I like to teach, there's only like 4 actual limitations that slow people down, and they all start with the letter M, right? So it's like marketing, meaning like leads. You just can't get enough deals, coming across your plate. So that's marketing. There's money. We just can't raise enough money. We don't have enough money in our pockets, whatever. There's management. I can't operate that big of a business. Or there's mindset. And I would call that also like intention or like desire. Like, so if you had to pick, like, what is your bottleneck to scaling? Is it lack of desire? Is it cash? Is it houses? Or is it the ability to manage it all?
That's a good question.
I would say it's been a little bit of a few of those throughout different seasons. So like after we bought the first 10, 4 of those were in Arizona. Arizona was great. Like we loved Arizona.
Yeah.
Property taxes are awesome there. We wanted to keep growing. Arizona was relatively new and they were starting to scale quickly. We ran out of money at that time.
Yep.
And they were sending us, all their initial deals at first. We bought 4 of them in like 2 months. And then they started sending us more and we ran out of money. So we had to say no. And when we said no, they went and found other investors. And that was a time when like Arizona was a hot real estate market. And so as they go and find other people, it basically pulled the numbers down. And by the time we had the capital to come back and buy them, they're like, hey, like we can't, at the time we were shooting for the 1% rule.
Yeah.
Back then. Now we can't even make the 1% rule work. We're well above that. But
because of interest rates, right?
Because of interest rates.
Yeah, the payment's so high that 1%.
Well, and then certain like Illinois has really high property taxes.
Yeah.
So that's going to be 3-4 times what it is in Arizona. So so we're definitely pushing beyond that. But so money kind of caused us to slow down there. I would say we've always had motivation. We've wanted to continue.
You want to scale. Like,
okay. Yeah. And then, the marketing's, I don't know if it's as much marketing or, like we got a negative kind of experience from management kind of through that season when this was mostly in like Florida and South Carolina. Like we were buying properties out there and that was going really well. And then they basically said, stop giving houses to those investors.
Really?
For a period of time. Yeah. So.
All right. One final question from me on the sober living thing. People listening to this might go, well, geez, you got the connections with Oxford House. I got 50 grand sitting in the bank. I want to invest in sober living. What do I do? Like, how do I get those connections? And I know you have a company that maybe helps with this, but like whether it's your company or something, like how do I get into this? Like, help me.
So, first off, like you can look for vacancies like in the local area, like act like you're looking for a house. So start Google searching, sober living houses in the area and see if you can get them on the phone and, ask to talk to somebody who's in housing and all that and see if they need more houses. So that's kind of the first step. It's going to be hard to get a hold of somebody. So you're going to have to, because they're not real estate people and they're not, I would say a lot of people inquire about things and most of the questions that they get are, hey, I've got this house. It's not working as a normal rental. It's not cash flowing. Can I make it a sober living house? It's a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, and it's 1,000 square feet. I'm like, no. Or it's, I've got this 7-unit, building that I could turn it. No, like it needs to be a single family home. That's part of it. Like they need to have one kitchen, one living room. They're a family coming together because if they're out on their own, they're going to get in trouble.
Yep.
So that's a lot of the questions. So the inbound calls to them it's hard to kind of break through.
Yeah.
So we got lucky in the beginning where we found this house through a connection who already was talking to Oxford House. And they weren't buying it. So we got introduced to them. So that kind of was our entry point. On the reverse side, if you don't want to do the work, you just want to deploy that 50 grand and buy a house, we do turnkey deals now. So we're seeing so many deals kind of coming our way. Like I'm buying 3 to 7 houses a month right now. And like, that's a lot of just managing the transactions and everything. But we are now basically consulting on houses. So people can come into our kind of email list and we send out deals that we're not buying and they can claim those deals. And then we basically consult through the whole transaction. We'll pre-negotiate the rent so they know exactly what they're going to get on the cash flow side once they buy it. And then we'll do the property management. So it's, mostly a passive investment.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And what company is that?
That's Rooted Sober Living. So
you guys were a sponsor at the REI Summit. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Rooted. That's not why you're here today. You're not paying to be here, but I love that you were paying to be at the REI Summit. So Rooted, what website is?
rootedsoberliving.com.
Rooted Sober Living. Where's rooted come from, that word?
So my previous church, they did a program called Rooted, and I just always really liked that name. And so Rooted has been a number of different things. We did some kind of men's mastermind stuff that didn't have to do with sober living. We've done some coaching, and we've kind of dabbled in some different areas. And so we just really liked the brand Rooted. We used to be Impact Cash Flow. So that was our previous brand, but we've kind of shifted to Rooted. And so that's what we're using now. But it's a...
And how does, sorry, I'm dominating these questions.
No.
How does your faith, like you're a Christian guy, right?
Yep.
So Christian guy, how does your faith interact with your business? Is there a connection there? Is it you keep them separate, or like, how do they interact?
It's in our brand. Like our logo has a cross in it.
Okay.
So like we definitely put ourselves out there, and we try to engage in conversations. And my partner, Jared, is great. Like anyone who he talks to, like they're going to know exactly where he stands with his faith and everything. And so like that has taught me a lot, and definitely helped me gain more confidence talking about my faith to other people who, aren't believers, or, ask questions and all that. And so it's a big part of it. Oxford House is not a religious organization. But I would say a lot of people going through addiction have a problem with identity, and they've been given their identity by people. You're an addict, you're this, you're that. And I think it's important to find your God-given identity and why he put you on this earth, and find what your purpose is. And so we're trying to find ways to kind of incorporate that into, like our property management business. Like as we are talking to the members that are in these houses, or the outreach workers, how can we kind of lightly, go in that direction? So
one of the Jared's such a great guy, and he'll probably listen to this, but one of the coolest things was at the REI Summit, when we were having our worship service, he rallied like, was it 50, 60 people to do a prayer meeting before our service? Yeah, did you not know that?
No, I had no idea.
Yeah, they were all right outside the front just doing a prayer meeting beforehand. It was awesome.
I had no idea.
It's awesome. Yeah, we've done that a couple times. Last year at Limitless, it was like a sunrise hike up the Camelback Mountain. And sunrise is at it was like 4:30. And there was like 40 people that showed up pitch black, 4:30 in the morning to climb this mountain. And it's a decent climb.
Yeah.
And we prayed on top of the mountain before the Limitless Expo. And so like that's sort of become our thing. When we go to conferences, like we're going to organize a prayer event, whether it's doing something hard like climbing a mountain, or just meeting outside before worship. So
yeah. What about just because we kind of had a business together for a little bit. And I got to just hang out with you, and watching the way that you are a parent and a husband is amazing. And tell us about that, just your family.
Yeah. So I've been married. It'll be 10 years in October, and we've got 3 boys, 7, 5, and 9 months. And so, yeah, that is definitely the biggest challenge in my life. And when I was running the tech company for those 7 years, I was like, I actually said this to my wife. I was like, hey, I'm going to grind, and we're going to have a big exit, and I'm going to set up our family for life, and we're going to be able to spend all this time together and all that. And I kind of lost focus, or I was just young and naive, but the time is precious in every moment. And I should have never done that. I should have never said those words, because it's very important to kind of set aside time now and every moment for our kids. And so, yes, it's really important. I think God gave me 3 sons for a reason. I mean, the third one, we were asking God for a girl, and we got a boy, and we're so thrilled that we have all boys. And I feel like it's one of my largest purposes in life is to raise men.
Yeah.
And so that is, it's kind of the reason I do everything.
What's your screen time policy? How do you operate screen times?
With the kids?
Yeah.
Well, they're homeschooled. And so it's been harder with the baby, because when I'm working and she's taking care of the baby and stuff, we've had to deal with that. But yeah, we typically try to limit it to like an hour a day.
Yeah.
So we're working on how to get a clock or something, but we try to stick to an hour a day.
I just got a little like wind up clock on Amazon that like the Wilder can actually see.
Yeah.
And I give them an hour a day. And I asked the question because I don't know what to do. Like,
Yeah.
I'm going to ask every parent I ask this question
The
to.
third one, like you said, that was when, because our kids had no screen time until the third.
Yeah.
But then with the third, it was like, you need another parent there. Like it's you can't just, hey, you take one, you take the other, we'll play with them. And it's like, you need something else. And so it's like, I just watch the iPad. So the third one makes a screen time really hard.
Yeah.
Well, and your kids are closer together. Like with ours, our older two there's a decent gap between our youngest. And so it's actually great because our 7-year-old is really good at like watching the baby, and like we can actually like leave the room and like know that he's not going to let him kill himself and
go. Yeah,
so,
exactly.
So, and they're, I mean, 2 older boys have been fantastic with the baby, and they love him and everything. So yeah.
That's awesome. How will you, as you continue to grow, and you've got a 7-year-old, like, I'm always interested, will you incorporate them into your business at all as they get older? And how will you do that?
Absolutely. I mean, my oldest Griffin, he's brilliant. Like he looks at things and he figures out how to put them together. Like he's into dragons. And so he like gets a whole bunch of paper and he turns it into like a whole wingsuit in like no time. And he figures just all these things out. And so he's curious what I do.
Yeah.
And so he knows that I buy houses. He asks a ton of questions already. And so, I think as kind of we grow, I'll walk him through houses and, start teaching about the financials of it. But I mean, right now he talks about saving money to buy a house.
That's awesome.
So he's on that trajectory. My middle son is more of an athlete. He's like, I'm just going to shoot this basketball all day long.
Yeah.
So we'll see. He's 5 right now. But he looks up to his older brother. And so he'll probably jump on board and
Love that. I've seen your spreadsheets, and so you can figure anything out. So I'm sure Griffin's a lot like that. Like, wild.
All right, we're going to start moving toward the kind of wrapping up the show here with a few more segments. But before we do, one aspect of the show is we give 100% of the profits from this show and the media kind of company here toward a charity of the guest's choosing. So where are we sending profits from this episode?
Yeah. Thanks for asking. I think that's an awesome thing to do with your podcast. But for my wife and I, we love supporting child trafficking. So I know you're already doing that with Better Life Tribe.
Yeah.
So that's fantastic. But I think for the proceeds from this, since we're talking about sober living, we can send that to Oxford House.
Okay.
Love it.
That would be a fitting. So with that said, let's hear from our sponsor. All right, so I look down at my phone and I see this text. You need to call me. Your house is on fire. And I sat there and I'm looking at the screen and I'm wondering, is this some kind of a joke? The guy who sent it was a tenant I had been trying to evict for months and he hadn't paid in forever. He had trashed the house. I mean, it was disgusting. And the guy himself was, pretty darn unstable. Now, of course, I call him after that text and it goes to voicemail. Great. Now, a few minutes later, I get a call from the fire department. Yep, my first ever rental house was burning down. So how did I get myself in that situation? Well, I didn't screen that tenant. I put in someone I thought would be good, and he was until he wasn't. Now, this is over a decade ago, and since then, I've learned how to properly vet a tenant. And that's through Turbo Tenant, which makes screening for both background and credit really, really easy. But it gets even better. Turbo Tenant also helps you market your rentals to like dozens of the largest sites, including apartments.com and Redfin. You can create custom leases that cover all your rental laws. And you can even use Turbo Tenant for your automatic rent payments. All of this for less than the cost of your Netflix subscription. Yeah, I know, crazy. Save time, save money, and save your sanity by using Turbo Tenant. And because you're so darn cute, you can use the code Brandon10 to save 10%. So check it out at turbotenant.com/betterlife. Hey, so many of you have heard me tell that story about how I bought my daughter Rosie a fourplex, like a rental property, the week she was born, and how we put it on an 18-year, mortgage payoff plan so it'll be paid off when she graduates from high school. So essentially, my tenants are paying for Rosie's entire college. Now that's pretty awesome, right? Not to mention, it's also making almost like $1,000 a month in cash flow. That's double awesome. But I don't think I've ever shared really exactly how I found that deal. So here goes. I found it through direct mail marketing. And here's how. I simply built a high quality lead list of a lot of names and addresses of potential sellers, and I sent out a whole bunch of mail to every person on that list. And then I talked on the phone to a ton of people, and then I finally got one person that was interested enough to sell me the property, and I got a deal at a great price. So building that giant lead engine like that, I mean, it works, but it takes a ton of time, knowledge, and effort, which can really slow down an investor's growth, which is why I reached out to my friend Ryan with Ballpoint Marketing. I asked him to sponsor this show because they're the best at doing everything that I just talked about. Like, they're literally going to help you build your entire lead engine. You're going to get a one-on-one call where they're going to help you figure out what you want and then build your lead list for you. Their robots are going to handwrite the postcards with a real pen, which is super cool. They're going to send them out, and they'll even answer the phone calls for you. Plus, they'll help you track it all inside of a CRM that they create for you. I know, it's crazy, crazy awesome. And it's going to help you land way more deals consistently. And because you're awesome and because you listen to this show, you're going to get a discount when you tell them that I sent you, or just use code Brandon when checking out with them. I love Ballpoint Marketing and officially recommend them to all my friends and masterminds. So if you're ready to kick your deal flow up a notch, getting more quality leads without pulling your hair out, just go to ballpointmarketing.com/betterlife. Or just shoot me a DM on Instagram with the word ballpoint, like one word, ballpoint, and I'll hook you up with them directly. All right, man, let's get to the 3, 2, 1 pivot, which we still need music for this, like a little button. Yeah, 3, 2, 1 pivot. A pivot meaning your life's going one direction and something changes it to go a little bit different. What are 3 pivot books in your life?
So I'll be honest, I have not been great at reading a lot of books until last year. When we were actually out here in Maui, you were the one that challenged me to start reading books.
Did I?
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
remember this.
And so I've actually read or listened to, mostly listened to a lot of books here in the last
Look
year,
at that. I love it.
which is good. So
Yeah.
I can't say they're necessarily pivot books and have changed my trajectory, but they definitely have changed the way that I think about things.
Okay.
So the first one was one of your recommendations to me. And so that's The One Thing by Gary Keller.
Right there.
Yeah. So
There should be a button that we also press every time they say a book that's on the
It's on
list
the-
of guests that we've had on
Yeah.
the show.
should probably look
Yeah.
through this.
All right, The One Thing.
Yeah. So that one's great. It's kind of always in the back of my mind as I'm like feeling overwhelmed by all the different tasks that I have and stuff. And so that helps me kind of narrow things down and also as I'm like goal setting. So that one's been a really good one. The next one is Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell.
Ding, ding, ding. Right there. All right.
Well, you're not going to have the
Go
third.
3 for 3.
This one's really cool. And it's, for me, it's less about business. So when I had the tech company, we had a lot of employees. It was sort of chaotic for a while. And I've been very intentional about, as we grow the sober living home business, we don't have a whole lot of employees, but we also make things very efficient to where we don't have to spend a whole lot of time doing a lot of it. It's acquisitions, we close on it, it moves into the property management business, and then we go. But I've been incorporating it in my life, like getting a landscaper, doing certain things. It's like, why am I spending so much time out like pulling weeds and doing all this stuff when I could be spending that time with my kids? And so it's a cool way of thinking that. And then the third book is one that my wife got me onto, is called Good Energy.
I think I've heard of that. I haven't read it though.
And that one is it's mostly about like optimizing your metabolic rate. And it talks a lot about, I've kind of gone down the path of like health, of like cold plunges and saunas and like no seed oils and like eating habits and all that. And so like it breaks down the kind of like the misconceptions of like the pharmaceutical companies and doctors and like all the stuff they prescribe that doesn't necessarily help your health. And then ways that you can kind of biohack and help be the best performing you and obviously have good energy. So
Yeah.
as a father of 3 boys, I need to have lots of energy.
Yeah.
And so I thought that book was really cool.
Who wrote Good Energy?
Casey Means.
Cool, man.
Yeah.
Love it.
Perfect. 2 pivot people. Who are 2 people that have changed the direction of your life?
Yeah. So, well, we talked about Jared,
Mhm.
my partner. So I would say that he's one of them, but not on the business side. I would say, so I grew up in a Christian household
Mhm.
and I've been a Christian my whole life and I've been confident in that, but I wouldn't say that and I think a lot of people probably fall in this category. I've been a lukewarm Christian for most of my life. And what that means is like, I'm comfortable being a Christian. I'll go to church most of the time. But am I reading my Bible daily? Am I outspoken about it? Am I pursuing him? Am I asking him for, guidance through every decision? And so Jared has really pushed me to go well beyond a lukewarm Christian. And he continues to kind of push me on that. So he's outside of, my pastors or any spiritual leaders in my life. He's been the person that has helped push me in kind of my faith to take it to the next level. And so that's been a huge one. And then the other person I would just say is my father. He showed me what hard work is. And so he also taught me about construction. He taught me so many things in my life that have gotten me to where I'm at today. So definitely would say that he's the other one.
Cool.
Yeah.
What about a pivot quote?
So I don't know who initially said it, but
Probably Abe Lincoln.
Yeah.
He says all the quotes.
And it's probably a cliche one, but I like choose your hard.
Yeah.
I like this. There's so many ways that you can go about it, but it's like, you can choose to save your money and be fiscally responsible. And that's hard. Or you can be paycheck to paycheck or in a lot of debt. And that's also really hard.
Yeah.
You can choose to, buy organic and like pay for healthy food now, or you can pay later, through, Medicare, medical bills and all that. Medical bills make up 70% of bankruptcies. Later on, it's getting worse. So, there's a lot of, every day is hard and you just have to embrace the path that you want to take. It's either hard now or it's hard later.
Yeah. I was reading, I don't know, somewhere, and it was talking about that. And it was like you said, like working out every day, that's hard. But also being not able to get out of bed in the morning is hard. And one of the things that I thought was good, was on that, it was talking about marriage, where it was like waking up every day and serving your wife and like having intentional conversation and going on date nights. That's hard, especially with kids and stuff. But also divorce is really, really hard, and so.
When you're in a rough spot in your marriage, it's like the hardest thing in the world. Like every part of your life sucks when you're having a hard relationship. So choose your hard. I like it.
Love it.
All right.
We're moving to the next segment, past, present, future. So let's start with past. So if you could go back in time and talk to 20-year-old Travis, what would you tell him?
So I'd probably a couple things. One on the faith side is don't be a lukewarm Christian. Lean into my relationship with God, have a relationship with him, and use him to help me make decisions, ask him for guidance. So I think that's a big part of it. I would also say like don't care what people think. I think, through college and stuff, it's like I get out of college and it's like, oh, I got this new job. I'm making good money and stuff. And it's like, am I doing it for myself or am I doing it for, what people think of me? And so, those are a couple things. Obviously start reading some, self-help books and business books. Podcasts have been great. I don't think podcasts were as big of a deal when I got it when I was 20 years old. So, there's so many more resources that 20-year-olds have today than we did.
Yeah.
Cool,
man. What is something that you've done like over the past year that's improved your life, given you a better life? It could be a habit, action, a new routine.
Yeah. Well, one of the other books I read was Miracle Morning.
Yeah.
And so, ding.
We've got
So through that, like I've been waking up really early. I start my day with a cold plunge. I do a workout pretty much every day. And I try to get up at least an hour before my kids. And so it allows me to, I can read my Bible, I can get a lot done. And I feel like I've done something hard. I've, accomplished a lot for the day. And I just feel like I've got so much more energy throughout the day. So that has been a really big deal for me, especially with young kids. It's like when they're awake, every minute is a grind.
Especially with a 9-month-old.
You want to hear a cool tip? I can't remember who told me this, and I've said it on the podcast before, but I'll say it again because I just love this, what I'm doing in my life. Similar, like the idea of the morning routine. So I bought a brand new Bible recently, and I bought one that had large margins. Like you can find a large margin Bible. And so I got this Bible brand new, and I spent a lot on like this really nice leather cover because I want it to last. So every morning I read one chapter of the Bible, and then I read it and then I write a note to Rosie in the margins.
Oh, that's
and
cool.
I write something from that passage. So if I'm reading about, I just finished Genesis and I'm in Exodus tomorrow. But so I did it about a month ago. So I'm reading about one a day. So like if it's in the story of, whatever, I don't know, whatever, let's just say like Jacob and Esau, right? I'll say something like, I hope that your relationship with your brother and any other siblings you may have someday, is a lot, blah, 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 better than this. Some message to Rose that's encouraging. And I do it every single chapter of the Bible. So it'll take 3 years to get through the whole Bible, roughly. By the time I'm finished then, Rosie will now be like 10 and Wilder will be like 7. I'm going to start a new one for Wilder. And then if I have more kids, every time I have a new kid, I'll do another one. So when they're 18, I'll go off to college. I'm going to give them the Bible that has thousands of notes from scripture, from dad. But here's the coolest part, or maybe the whole thing's cool, is that I get 10 times more out of reading it now because I'm reading it with intention of pulling out truth from scripture versus checking a box. I just got to get through this chapter. Let me just read this chapter. That's now awesome. I'm reading it like, how do I, and then I'm like, oh, I'm not writing notes to Rosie. I'm writing notes to myself.
Yeah.
It's so cool. I'm going to keep talking about this for the rest of my life because I'm like,
that's an awesome tip.
Yeah.
I love that.
I love it.
And that cool. It's so easy. And it's like you're reading the Bible anyway. Why not read it for your kids? And then, if something should ever happen to you, it's like your kids will have thousands of notes.
Yeah.
Anyway,
super cool.
Moving on.
What do you want your kids to say about you when they're old and talking to their kids or grandkids about their dad?
I mean, I think he made so much time for them. And that, time is such a big thing for me right now.
Yeah.
And, as kind of we've gotten into, building a decent portfolio of real estate, like it's amazing for having, somewhat passive income, and it allows us to, come out to Maui here and spend the week with my family on the beach and all that. But I want to pour into those kids. And I hope that, they can say that they've learned, most of what they know from me, and that, they learn how to do business. They learn how to be strong Christians. They learn to be men. I think we need, more men who can lead their families and, carry on what they've learned into future generations. And I think it takes a man of a household to be able to, drive that.
Love that.
All right, man, let's wrap things up. What are you excited about? What's coming up in your life, personal or professional?
Well, we're helping people get into sober living houses. We're continuing to buy some ourselves. At this point, I would say mostly on the side of my kids, they're getting to an age where they're enjoying doing more sports. I was an athlete, and so I enjoy doing a lot of different sports, and we live on a lake. And so we like to wakeboard, and the kids are starting to show interest and get into that. And so I would say I'm really looking forward to this next season with my kids, of being able to teach them things that I really enjoy, and they can be, my partner doing those things together, instead of just, watching me, or I go off with friends and do it. So I think I'm mostly excited for that season with the boys.
Last question. Where can people find you? They can hear more about Rooted. Where can they find all that good stuff at?
Well, we mentioned rootedsoberliving.com. They can go on there. They can sign up. It's free just to sign up on the email list to receive deals. They can also schedule a Zoom call with myself or my partner to learn more about that process. It's completely free. There's no obligation or anything. I'm not big on social media, but they can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Travis T. Gough, Gough. And
Awesome.
yeah.
Cool.
This has been amazing.
Are you live?
You better close this up, man.
It's been
I had no
absolutely
voice. What
amazing.
happened?
I love getting to hear your story, and people will absolutely love it because there was so much incredible content in there. So it was a blast.
It was awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Boom.
Yep.
And that, my people, is the show. Thank you for tuning in. And hey, before you go, if you enjoyed the episode or if you enjoy the show in general, please consider leaving us a rating and review wherever you listen to podcasts. We really do value your feedback, and we read the comments. We make future decisions about topics and guests and everything else. Plus, it helps us reach more people the more reviews we get. And last but not least, please head over to social media. Consider friending and following and subscribing to all that stuff at Better Life and my personal page at Beardy Brandon on Instagram, YouTube, and everywhere else. Thank you again for listening. I'm honored that you would bring me along on your journey toward building wealth through real estate investing without losing your soul.